Picture this. You're looking at a crowd of 3.5 billion people. That is literally half of the entire human population on Earth. So what did all of these people have in common back in 2018? Well, they all tuned in, whether on TV or digital platforms, to watch one single sporting event, the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Honestly, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around that sheer level of global attention.
Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here. Today, we're going to completely unpack the wildly profitable and frankly kind of bizarre business model behind the organization that commands all that attention. So let's just dive right into it. How does FIFA actually generate its massive revenues? And maybe the better question, why do countries practically line up around the block to take on the astronomical costs of hosting this tournament? To follow the money, here is our agenda. We'll cover 1. The scale of the game. 2. The revenue machine. 3. The ultimate financial trick. 4. The host's burden. And finally, 5. Is hosting worth it? Let's get started. Part 1. The scale of the game, a global phenomenon. Look, to understand the money, you first have to understand the size of this operation. Founded way back in 1904, FIFA has grown into an absolute behemoth. Right now, they oversee 211 affiliated teams. And what's super fascinating here is that these aren't all independent countries, right? Territories like Macau and the US Virgin Islands, they actually have their own teams too. These are all divided up into 6 continental confederations covering the entire globe. Well, except for Antarctica, for obvious reasons.
But here is where you might have a real aha moment. Despite raking in literal billions of dollars, FIFA's legal structure is shocking. They are technically an NGO, a non-governmental organization. Yeah, on paper, they're a non-profit entity just dedicated to promoting football worldwide. And to be fair, they do run social development programs, things like Education for All and Protect Children through the FIFA Foundation. But, as we're about to see, their financial ledger looks a whole lot different than your local neighborhood charity. Moving right along to Part 2, the revenue machine. Billions in play. So how does all this money actually flow into an NGO? Well, FIFA is governed by a 37-member council, but financially speaking, their entire existence basically runs on a very specific 4-year cycle tied directly to the Men's World Cup. Just look at the 2015 to 2018 cycle. That revenue machine churned out a staggering $6.4 billion. And the main takeaway here is just how concentrated that income is. A massive 83% of that $6.4 billion came exclusively from the 2018 World Cup tournament. For FIFA, the World Cup isn't just their biggest event. It's practically their entire financial lifeblood.
And they are definitely not stopping there. The numbers are absolutely skyrocketing. For the 2019 to 2022 cycle, estimates push that revenue up to $7.5 billion. Looking ahead to 2026, we could realistically see revenues hit the $10 billion mark. You might be wondering, why the huge jump? Mostly it's 2 massive growth engines. First, they've got new, completely separate sponsor deals for the wildly popular Women's World Cup. And second, the 2026 men's tournament, hosted by the US, Canada, and Mexico, is expanding from 32 teams to 48. More teams mean more matches, way more broadcast hours, and a ton more advertising real estate. So where do these billions actually come from? If you break down that 2015 to 2018 cycle, you get a really clear picture. Broadcasting rights are the absolute heavyweight here, pulling in $3.1 billion alone. Networks around the globe like Viacom 18 in India, for example, pay mind-blowing sums for the rights to air these games. Then you've got marketing rights at $1.66 billion, which is fueled by massive corporate sponsors. Think Adidas, Coca-Cola, Visa. Combined, TV and marketing make up roughly 75% of FIFA's entire revenue pie. The rest just kind of trickles in from licensing like the video games, plus ticketing and hospitality. Which brings us to Part 3, the ultimate financial trick, zero expenses, zero taxes. Generating billions is one thing, right? But keeping it? That is where FIFA's true genius kicks in. Let's look at what they actually pay out.
The ultimate trick here lies in contrasting the expenses between FIFA and the host. For the 2022 World Cup, FIFA's main expense was the prize money, $440 million divided among the teams, with the winner taking home $42 million. But the host nation? They are stuck footing the bill for the physical reality of the games. We're talking building the stadiums, expanding the airports, constructing hotels, and operating the event itself. FIFA essentially just licenses out the tournament, collects the broadcasting and marketing billions, hands out the prize money, and leaves the host government with a massive, massive check.
And get this, To even be considered for hosting duties, a country has to agree to FIFA's incredibly strict demands. Before a single ball is even kicked, FIFA requires 7 specific guarantees from the host government. This means complete control over commercial rights, special visa procedures, specialized safety protocols, but the absolute most mind-blowing requirement? Complete tax exemption. You heard that right. For all the billions of dollars FIFA generates within the host country during those games, they legally obligate the host government to waive any and all taxes on those earnings. 0 expenses for infrastructure and 0 taxes on revenue. Now for Part 4, the host's burden, true costs and controversies. When a country signs up to host, they are taking on a monumental undertaking. Let's take a really close look at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar as our primary case study so we can understand the true weight of this burden.
Reports from major outlets like Forbes and Bloomberg estimated Qatar's total expenditure for the 2022 World Cup at a jaw-dropping $200 billion. Now, we do need to add a bit of context here, because that number is slightly misleading. The actual stadiums themselves cost around $6.5 billion. The vast majority of that $200 billion was actually part of Qatar National Vision 2030. That means building out a modern metro system, expanding airports, and creating entirely new districts in Doha. Those are infrastructure projects intended to outlast the tournament. But building all of this at such an accelerated pace brought an entirely different set of costs.
As you likely know, the 2022 World Cup was marked by severe international controversies. There were widespread reports regarding the treatment of migrant workers from South Asia who literally built this infrastructure. We're talking allegations of forced labor, withheld payments, and according to various reports, thousands of tragic deaths over the decade of construction. Amnesty International even advocated that FIFA should set aside $440 million to compensate workers. On top of that, there were intense global debates regarding Qatar's restrictive laws on LGBTQ+ rights, plus commercial controversies, like the really abrupt ban on stadium alcohol sales, which directly hit major FIFA sponsor Budweiser just days before kickoff. And hovering above all of this was the persistent question of how the hosting rights were awarded in the very first place back in 2010. The integrity of that bidding process has been heavily scrutinized. Objectively speaking, over half of the 22 FIFA Executive Committee members who voted to award the games to Qatar have since been implicated or investigated for alleged corruption and bad practices. Even Sepp Blatter, who was the FIFA president at the time, later came out and publicly stated that allowing Qatar to host was a mistake.
Finally, Part 5. Is hosting worth it? The ultimate ROI. Knowing the massive financial obligations, the incredibly strict guarantees demanded by FIFA, and all the intense global scrutiny that comes with it, why in the world do countries still fight so fiercely to host this tournament? Well, let's weigh the potential return on investment.
For the host nation, the upside is usually pitched as a mix of tangible and intangible benefits. Intangibly, it's all about soft power. Successfully hosting the world's absolute biggest event signals to the globe that your country is stable, modern, and open for business, theoretically making it a highly viable option for foreign investment. Tangibly, it brings an immediate massive influx of tourists. For Qatar, an estimated 1.2 million visitors brought in an expected $17 billion boost to the local economy. Plus, as we mentioned, the country gets to keep all that shiny new infrastructure, like the metros and airports.
But, and this is a really massive but, what happens to the specialized sports infrastructure, the stadiums? This quote perfectly highlights the devastating white elephant risk. Following the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, the $550 million Mané Garrincha Stadium literally ended up being used as a bus parking lot. Another $215 million stadium saw its locker rooms sheltering the homeless. Building these hyper-specific massive sports arenas often just leaves host countries with incredibly expensive, completely empty monuments once the fans pack up and go home. And you know, this economic strain hits developing nations the hardest. Instead of boosting the local populace, hosting can often deeply disrupt it. Reports from NGOs during the Brazil World Cup detailed the forced resettlements of thousands of families just to make way for construction. And perhaps most critically of all, there's the opportunity cost. The billions Brazil spent on World Cup stadiums was roughly equal to the entire budget of their vital Bolsa Familia social welfare program, a program that 50 million citizens relied upon. It's a stark reality. Money spent on a soccer stadium is money not spent on housing, healthcare, or education.
So that brings us to my final thought. We've traced the billions flowing into FIFA's tax-exempt accounts, and we've weighed the massive multi-billion-dollar burdens placed on the host nation's taxpayers. We've seen the incredible potential for tourism booms and the harsh reality of billion-dollar bus parking lots. So when the final whistle blows and all the global cameras pack up and leave, I want to leave you with this question to ponder. For the host nation, is bringing the World Cup to your home soil a true national victory? Or is it ultimately an economic own goal?
Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped you see the beautiful game in a whole new light.